Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's tutorial is a real-time tutorial from my Patreon back catalogue. As it's spooky season and coming up to that time of year that I absolutely love, I thought I would release this gorgeous black cat eye study. This is one of my favourite small pieces and it focuses on creating a really glassy, realistic orange eye, and it also teaches you the foundations and fundamentals that go into creating black fur. So we'll look at the layering process and also the techniques used to render both of these things. All the materials, liner and reference links can be found in the description for you, and please make sure you tag me if you are following along over on Instagram with your finished pieces. I'll be sharing them to my stories and creating a little album of them over there. But anyway, I really hope that you enjoy following this tutorial. It has a bunch of transferable skills that you can apply to other subjects, so it's really invaluable. So let's get into it. So we're going to start on this black cat eye study. So for this we just have the single eye, and it's a really nice striking orange eye set in this really dark fur. Now I've chosen this reference photo from Pixabay because it was a different position of the eye. Usually we draw eyes that are like kind of straight on or to the side, but we've never kind of done like a downwards looking angle. So I thought this one would be a little bit different to work on, and yeah, I was really kind of captured by how orange the eyes are. I think they're slightly digitally enhanced, but that doesn't matter too much. We're still going to have fun with this one, and lots of the like different tones within the eye. And then moving on to the black fur, which is a really nice, easy kind of task to deal with. So I have chosen the colours here, got a nice selection, and they will be listed as a PDF download for you guys. The paper that I'm using is the Fabriano Artistico Hot Pressed Watercolour paper, 140 extra white, and this is about 10 by 10 centimetres, so it's a fairly small study. It's not too overwhelmingly large to deal with. It's a really nice kind of beginner project, which I always love to do because these ones always turn out really, really nicely. In addition to my colour pencil list and my paper, I also have here a kneaded eraser. We're going to use this to lift the outline or the graphite here so it doesn't show through on any of the coloured pencil work. In addition to this, I also have a nice big fluffy brush to get rid of any sort of pencil residues that build up, or any kind of dust or anything that kind of gets onto the paper that's kind of going to obscure the drawing a little bit here. I also have an embossing tool for the whiskers, so I've just got this one, so I'm going to use this end. It's not too large, it's not too small, it's going to be just about the right size for this size drawing to add in the whiskers. Kind of wanted something along the same kind of width as the pupil here, and this one will do the job nicely. I also have a sharpener to make sure I've got really nice super sharp points on all the pencils. I'm using the Swordfish Icon sharpener. It's one of these mechanical ones. You can use whatever sharpener and whatever you feel like as well. Something that isn't listed on the materials list, on this colour sheet here, is a white pencil, and I'm going to be using this for blending. And this is the Prismacolor White. It's a PC938, just the Prismacolor Premiere. Now you don't have to use a white pencil for blending if you don't feel comfortable with using pencils to blend with, or kind of allowing the pencils to blend as you go. You can use any method that you are comfortable with. So you could use a specific blending pencil like the Derwent one, you can use a burnisher, you could even use solvent as well. Just when you, if you are using a solvent or anything that isn't sort of what I'm using here, make sure that you just kind of follow how you would usually use it. So usually when I say to blend, you don't always necessarily need to blend if you're using a solvent. I tend to blend a fair amount as I go throughout, using the white pencil and the pencils themselves. So you need to kind of judge for yourself if you're using a solvent when you need to blend. So you need to make sure that you have enough layers put down, and that it's not going to go kind of grainy looking. And just be aware that if you're using a solvent, it will darken the colours as well. So just be aware of that if you're using various other methods for blending. But these are the tools that I will be using. Let's hop straight into this. So the first thing we're going to do is just lift the graphite using the kneaded eraser. If you don't have a kneaded eraser, that's fine. Use an ordinary eraser, like the kind of plastic ones that you get. But I like the kneaded eraser because it just gently lifts. You can just roll it over your line drawing and it just lifts it just enough so that you can still see it underneath, so you still have lines to follow, but it doesn't sort of impair any of the coloured pencil work that's going to go over the top, so it's a really nice thing to use. You can also use something like blue tack to lift your pencil if you don't have a kneaded eraser, but these are really inexpensive if you wanted to get yourself one, and it's a really useful thing to use as well. So we're going to go straight into the eye first. So what we need to do first of all is map out areas and kind of jot down a lot of white pencil where we have the highlights, because those are going to be the areas that we want to preserve. So I like to use my pencil so it's not quite sharp, like this isn't sharp at all, it's kind of blunt. And I quite like to use my pencil in this way to add in these kinds of areas that I want to preserve, because if you use a sharp point, it ends up breaking and then you need to sharpen your pencil again. But using a blunt one, you can apply a fair amount of pressure, so you can really kind of create that resist that you need in these highlighted areas. So I'm just looking at the reference photo and just following the kind of lines that I've drawn here and just applying a fair amount of pressure to the coloured pencil so that we can really block off these lighter highlight areas here. So you may find that in some smaller areas that you can't quite get in there, so you might need a sharper point, but it doesn't matter if you kind of go outside those lines, because you can add coloured pencil with a sharp point back over the top. So it's not the end of the world if you can't go within the lines, so to speak. So there's just a few areas that we just need to kind of block off with this, like so. Just two main ones, one just here and then one just here, and then some smaller ones just around the pupil. So we've got those in. So now what we're going to do is add down some of the outer edge using the dark sepia. So I like to use a really sharp pencil for this, so this isn't quite sharp enough for what I like. I'm going to give it a quick sharpen. Just redefine that point a little bit, and then I'm just going to go around the outside of the iris along the upper eyelid. I'm not going to add in any of these eyelashes coming over the eye just yet, we're just going to go around that. So you just want to really lightly trace your graphite line. So just use a light pressure on your dark sepia to begin with. And the reason you want to use a light pressure is so that if you make a mistake, it's nice and easy to lift and erase. So what I'll do is just show you just how easy it is to lift using the kneaded eraser. You can just go in and you can tack this down. It doesn't lift it completely, but you can just go in and lift it so it kind of just looks like a little bit of a graphite line. And if you use a light pressure, it's just so much easier to do that. If you go in with a heavy pressure, it's really difficult to lift effectively and efficiently. You can lift it eventually, but it takes a lot of time and effort, and a lot of people often give up when using that method, especially if they've gone in with that hard pressure. So I'm just defining the kind of tear duct area, and then just following the outline of the eye, avoiding those sort of eyelashes, and just coming around the edge of the eye as well. So we've got that outer edge around the iris there, and then we can go in with a slightly heavier pressure and really define those lines. So you've got a really nice strong dark outline to the iris. Oops. Like so. It doesn't really matter if your lines are a little bit kind of ugly looking. We're going to be adding black fur around here anyway, so it's going to disappear. Now what we also want to do is add in our pupil. So this is really thin and wispy, so we're just going to really lightly add that in. Just using the light hand technique once again. Just gently adding that in, and then if you're happy with the placement, then you can just go in and really darken up that line a little bit more, like so. So now we can just go straight into the iris. So we're gonna go in and add some ivory. Now with this, we're just going to make circular motions with the pencil, going right up to the edge of the dark sepia outline, and going around those highlighted areas as well, just using a really large kind of circular motion. And you want to use a circular motion so that you get as much of the paper covered as possible, and it gives you a really nice smooth surface to work on as well, which is perfect for eyes. You want to be careful of going too far over and into the dark sepia line, because otherwise you're going to drag all of that kind of darker colour into your iris, and you want to kind of avoid that if possible. So don't work too closely to your dark lines, and if you do accidentally go over, make sure that you have a scrap piece of paper, and so you can kind of wipe off the tip of your pencil so you get rid of any kind of dark marks that are going to kind of ruin the nice light effect that you want going on in the iris here. So you just want to go over like a couple times, build up a really nice kind of ivory base, and then once you've done that, we can start to go in with our next colour. So we're going to just work from our lightest to our darkest yellows through oranges. We have a dark cadmium yellow here, so I've got a fairly sharp point on the pencil. It doesn't matter if it's not too sharp, not the end of the world. We're just going to go into pretty much all of this area. Again, we're going to use the circular motion. I'm just going to fill in all of the areas around the highlight, so try not to go over the highlight if you can, but it shouldn't matter too much if you do go over the highlight, because you've kind of created up that kind of resist barrier of the white pencil. Okay, so we're going to go over that with the white, and it's going to really tone it down. So again, it doesn't matter if you haven't got a sharp pencil, but we're going to use a light pressure on the white pencil here, and this time you can kind of go into the kind of highlighted areas. This is just going to help to create a nice kind of waxy surface to work on, as well as just kind of smooth it down and lighten it. So then we're going to go in with some of the dark chrome yellow, and this time we're just going to kind of concentrate on where we do have some slightly darker areas. So I've got a sharper point on this pencil, and we're just going to concentrate on some of the shadowy areas. So really kind of look at your reference photo and just have a little bit of a squint at it, and the darker areas are mainly around the very outer edge, directly next to this dark sepia line. So it's quite easy to add those down. I'm just going to go like straight in next to that line. And at this stage, we're also going to add in a little bit of those kind of grey blue, grey green tones that you can see within these shadow areas as well. So this is where your eye starts to take on a little bit more dimension. It comes from looking quite flat to looking a little bit shaded. So any areas I can see where there's just like a little bit of like a darker tone, or where I imagine that there would be a darker tone, sort of just basically all around the edges, that's where we're going to be adding this. And we're actually going to go into some of those dark areas with some burnt sienna. So kind of just going straight in and darkening those up. Again, using a light pressure, and I'm just using that circular motion so we can get a really nice smooth blend, just so you get a really nice smooth surface to work on. So you can see by darkening the edges you kind of get a really nice sense that it's kind of getting a little bit more sort of orbital looking, like a glassy orb. And then we're going to take the earth green in a second and create some of those greeny areas. So taking the earth green, so we're just going to put some of this directly above. We've got these darker areas through here. Again, making that kind of circular motion. You just want to start off with the light pressure. Just working over a couple of layers here. So just using that light pressure, but just slowly building the layers. And just coming down into a darker area with this as well. I'm going to take the orange glaze and we're just going to add some of this down so we get a really nice orange vibrance coming through in some of these shadows, and we're just going to go over that earth green as well. It's going to create a really nice shadow. So we can just afford to be a little bit sort of heavier in the pressure as well, especially on the very outer edge where it's really nice and orange. So still keeping that circular motion with the pencil. Just really coming into the rest of the eye now and just starting to add in a few more of these sort of orange tones throughout the iris. So really paying attention to the reference photo and adding these in. So just creating, like, there's all of these little kind of eye characteristics, like all of these little lines, all of these little areas of this real bright orange tone which we need to add in. So I'm just using the orange glaze, that's what it's called, and adding that in. Just adding in like kind of faint areas and just rough areas to begin with of where all of this is sitting. Then we can go in and refine all of these. So I'm going to go back in again with the earth green. Back into those kind of greeny areas. Just add a few flecks of this throughout the iris as well. just coming around the pupil as well, because there's a slight green tone just coming off of the pupil, so just adding the earth green to there. This gives it a bit more of like a sinister vibe almost as well. And I'm also going to take this Caput Mortuum Violet, and we're going to bring some of this into the very outer edges of the eye. It's just going to help accentuate some of those shadows, just bring a little bit kind of like an extra warmth as well. So you can see just how much that kind of accentuates that. So really coming around the eyes and the edges. And we're also just going to come into these more sort of grey areas with some of the warm grey 4. Maybe even the warm grey 6 as well. I think I'm going to delve into the warm grey 6 so we can get that really nice and dark. Like that. And we're just going to take some of the burnt sienna, work some of that again into the outer edge and just spread it a little bit more through towards the centre of the iris. Taking some more of that, I'm going to use some of the dark cadmium yellow to go over some of these orange glaze areas and just really kind of hype them up, and then just going back in with some more of that orange glaze over the top once again. Get really nice tones in here. Coming in with the Caput Mortuum Violet. Just using the point of the pencil. Just really adding in the darkest areas. On the bottom. So I'm just going to focus a little bit more on these sort of upper areas now. So using the point of the orange glaze and really getting in some of this really vibrant orange tone. Just creating that texture within the iris. So kind of following the shape of like a diamond, like a, was it a diamond or a really long oval? Just following the shape of, like around the pupil, just kind of radiating around it. So starting like coming off towards this side and then slowly kind of coming down and then back up towards, coming towards the right hand side. Kind of like a radial effect. So I'm just using the point of the pencil just to kind of add in some like almost kind of wiggly lines, just to kind of convey a little bit of that kind of delicate texture that you often find within eyes. Just coming in once again with some of the grey, just to darken up some of these grey areas around the highlight. Using a little bit more of the earth green to just come into, again adding in these like wiggly lines, just bringing that texture up through some of this iris here. And I'm just using the Caput Mortuum Violet to add in some really dark kind of flecks and just really kind of almost like pinprick areas within some of that orange glaze colour into the iris here. Just adjusting this highlight. So I'm just going to give this a little bit of a blend with the white pencil. It's going to help to smush everything together and really smooth everything out. And then if we need to, we can go back in and darken or add a little bit more texture if necessary. So I'm just going to go in with some of the grey and really darken up this bit down here. Right on this bottom edge, just needs a lot more darkening. I might even go in there with some of the the dark sepia, just to really darken that up. Just really lightly, just to help push it a little bit further, and just darkening up some of these darker edges as well. Just helps to kind of bring that kind of eyelid colour into the iris, just to help get that shadow, help get that kind of spherical look. Okay, so in the highlighted areas, I'm just going to go in with a little bit more white. To really kind of pick up some of that highlight a little bit more. So if you lose any of the highlights, you can always go back in with like an opaque pen, like a gel pen or something similar. I'm actually going to go into these highlights with a little bit of the ivory. And then what I'm going to do is, I've got one of these Faber-Castell, it's kind of like a chalk paint. It's the Pitt Artist Pen in white, and I'm just going to use this to just come into my highlights, just neaten them up. This is archival as well, and it's water fast, and it draws really nicely over coloured pencil. And you can add in all of these like little tiny bits of highlight dotted throughout the eyes. It's really good at adding like the waterline in the eyes, which we will probably do a little bit later on when we add the eyelids. This is just a really easy way to add in your highlights, and you can work over the top of this as well if you need to. So looking at this, I think I just need to make a little bit of an adjustment to some of the orange areas just around the pupils. So I'm just going to add in a little bit of a darker tone, just using this burnt sienna, just coming into there. And it maybe even just needs a little touch of red, so I'm just going to use some rose carmine. Along the very edge here. And just add a little bit of that into the orange areas, just to give them a little bit of an extra substance, just a really nice tone to add to that. And again, this bit here just needs a little bit more darkening, so I'm actually going to go in there with some more dark sepia. So really darkening this up. Adding in a little bit of texture just by making those like wiggly lines. Using some of the Caput Mortuum Violet again, just to like kind of pinprick, just kind of dot in some of the texture just around there as well. And I think that is pretty damn almost there for this. I'm just going to take the black pencil and I'm just going to add in the pupil. So it's really nice and dark. Again, you can use like a fine liner, like one of the Pitt Artist pens, to add this in as well, so you get a really nice dark bit of the pupil, but a black pencil is fine for now. So that is the iris complete, so you should have a really nice, almost it's kind of spherical looking eye, and it looks really glassy. You've got your highlights and everything in the right place. So now we just need to concentrate on all of that black fur. And what we're going to do is just going to add our base layer all over this, and then we're going to just build up some of the undertones and then just go over the whole thing with our dark sepia and our black pencils. But before we go in and do that, we need to emboss the whisker lines. So you want to take your embossing tool and you just want to follow any kind of lines that you've added for the whiskers. You can add more whiskers than what's showing on the reference photo. You can kind of add a little bit of creativity with this, but I'm going to take the smaller end of my embossing tool. This is about I would say about 2mm or 1.5mm in width. I'm just going to use this like I would a pencil and just push quite hard down onto the paper, and then just in a fluid motion just kind of add the whisker in. So you kind of want to hold it close to the tip, or as far as towards the tip as you can. Push down. It doesn't matter if you kind of go off of your pencil line, that kind of adds to the kind of natural look. But you just want to make sure that you kind of follow the curvature and flick. So there's like 3 main sort of eyebrow whiskers that I'm going to add into mine there. Okay, so now what we need to do is go in, I'm actually going to add in the tear duct, this bit right next to the eye, and a little bit of the eyelid, and then we can go into adding in the base layer for the fur. So directly into this tear duct is really dark, so I'm going to go into this kind of curved triangle shape with my dark sepia pencil really lightly to make sure that I get that shape in correctly. Once I'm happy with that shape, then I can go in and start to really darken it. So I'm just going to increase the pressure. We're just going to put like 1 or 2 layers down of this. Increase the pressure on the dark sepia so you get this really nice dark area, and we can go over that with the black. So this is like a really flat looking area. I'm going to go in there with the black as well, really nice and dark right next to that iris, so the iris really sings. And there is a slight light section. I'm going to take the white pencil and just work gently over the top of that darker area, just so it's ever so slightly lighter. And then just work some of the Caput Mortuum Violet in there, just for a very slight variation there. So we're going to work on this bottom eyelid. There's a waterline there, but I think we're going to use this pen. If you don't want to use anything like this and you want to preserve, then use a really sharp white pencil to get right into that, and make sure that you don't add any of the next layer that we're going to add of the dark sepia directly next to the kind of iris. You want to kind of keep a little bit of a gap if you're going to use a white pencil, but if you're going to use other methods, then you can go right up to there and then add the whatever you're using over the top. So what I'm going to do for this is put down a base layer of the warm grape one. Just going to work directly around the eye. It's going to come slightly off of the sort of line of the graphite that I've added as well, so we don't just get like any kind of stop-start line, so we can blend it through seamlessly with the fur when we come to add the fur. Like so. Then we need to add some undertones. So this has like a really warm undertone, so we're going to be adding in some burnt sienna and some Caput Mortuum Violet. I'm going to add the burnt sienna first. So we're going to add the burnt sienna going directly next to this dark line that we added around the iris. And you're going to make sure that you kind of bring this off of the eyelid line as well, so you're coming past that graphite line a little bit, so you can really blend it into the fur. So we're just adding a really nice light layer. You can see just how light it's going down, and just adding this all the way around the eye. Then we're going to take the Caput Mortuum Violet and just add a similar layer over the top. Just going to very slightly shift and alter the tone. Then we can go through and blend with the white, and then we can just add our dark colours over the top. So going over with the white pencil. like so. Maybe just going in with a little bit more of the Caput Mortuum violet to just really saturate that colour. And then we can go in with the dark tone of the dark sepia. It's going to come in a slightly different direction. This is a really smooth area. It's not furry or anything, so I want to kind of make it as smooth as possible just by working in a slightly different direction so we get that really nice smooth surface. Then we're just going to come in with the dark sepia, and we can just slightly shade that over the top. So we just want to slightly darken. So we want those tones showing through. So just using a light pressure on the pencil. Like so. So we've got a nice sort of shaded eyelid. And then we're just going to kind of increase the pressure in a few areas where we do have a slightly like darker edge to this eyelid. There we go. And what we need to do is just come directly next to that iris. I'm going to use the black pencil and just redefine that dark line directly next to the iris. So really framing that eye. Just coming over and darkening with the black as well. And we can come in here with a little bit more of the Caput Mortuum and just quite heavily layer it down, just to increase the pressure on the pencil so we get a nice kind of purpley effect. Going over with some of the burnt sienna as well. And then we can add in that waterline. I'm going to use this white pen, and we're just going to add in little tiny dots and lines directly underneath where we've added that dark line next to the iris. So you want to be as precise as possible with this. Just add as much or as little of a waterline as you want. This might take a couple of attempts to really get it nice and opaque, but you can go over multiple times. Like that. And just add in little tiny dots to create a nice watery effect. Like so. There we go. You can clean up any lines as well by going back in with your coloured pencils and just going back over the top just to smooth the edges out or anything like that. But I'm really happy with how that is looking there. So the only other thing we need to do is just come into this area down here and just do exactly the same process. So we're just going to come in with the warm grey one. Just going to come in and follow the kind of fur direction that's denoted by the graphite line. So you're kind of coming in this direction, coming off of this, following this line. It kind of makes a really soft S. You're going to come on the right hand side, you're going to come towards the right hand side of the paper. And then on the left hand side you're going to come up towards the top left corner. Once you've got that in, then we can go in with a light layer of the burnt sienna. So we're just going to come around the very bottom half of this tear duct area just here. And again we're just going to lightly shade, and you want to shade in the direction that the fur is going in. So following that base layer direction. And we're just going to follow this line, this really soft S, all the way down to about here. And just a small amount on the top side as well. And we're just going to come onto that with some of the Caput Mortuum Violet. We're going to blend that with the white pencil so we get a nice smooth surface. And we're just going to come in with we're going to use the burnt sienna to just come in and resaturate some of those colours, just because it's a slightly sort of more orange tone down here. And on that top side as well. And then just coming over and darkening with this dark sepia. So just adding a darker layer over it and just coming off of this tear duct area and just kind of blending it through. Same with the top side here. There we go. So just really kind of darkening into the fur a little bit, just between the sort of eyelid area and this tear duct area down here. Just coming in with the dark sepia and just increasing the pressure there. There we go. Okay, so we've got our sort of main points of like skin added in. Now we need to go in and create the fur, and this is just going to be a really gentle process. We're just going to add in our base layers all the way over the whole thing. So we're going to figure out all of that fur direction and all of that tricky stuff, and then we can put down our sort of mid-tones, and then we can start to develop our darker tones, and that was then we can sort of avoid the areas where you've got lighter texture and the darker texture as well. So we're going to start this off. We're going in with our base layers. So when you're looking at your reference photo, you need to identify whether it's warm or cool. So in this case we have a cool toned area over the top here where the whiskers are. It's just slightly blue in tone. It kind of comes from the pupil and it kind of comes up towards this top right hand corner. The rest of the image is pretty much warm toned. So we're going to use our warm grey 1 for a majority of this, and then when we come into this area we'll use our cool grey 1. But I'm just going to lift the graphite a little bit more on there. So all of the graphite around this piece is lifted now. We're just going to come in and add our base layer of the warm grey 1. We're just going to start around the left hand side of the eye, and on this side we're just going to come up in this angle, so just coming like up this way, following the kind of graphite that's put down beforehand. So just really gently and really kind of not too roughly but not like too precisely, we're just shading down, so you can just see we've just got a nice base going down there, and then as we come up towards the edge here, just kind of coming more up, like in a more sort of vertical direction. And same down here. Just adding in the whole of that side with the warm grey 1. And then we're just going to come up over the eye and just start to kind of come off towards the right hand side now. So you want to kind of stop with this colour, you want to kind of come into and past where the pupil is there, but you don't want to go much further because that's where we're going to add in our cold grey. We just need to fill it in this middle section, just join these two areas up. And I'm also just going to come into the very end of the eye here, where it's just a little bit warmer, just fill in that bit. And we're just going to grab the cold grey one, and then we're just going to layer this down. So this is a slightly sort of more blue tone. You'll notice a difference when you lay this down. Just bringing it into the area of the warm grey one so we can blend the two areas together. You don't want like just a straight stop-start line. You want to kind of blend these together so you get a nice seamless effect. Otherwise it's going to look kind of really weird, like you suddenly stop with the warm grey and then it's a different tone. You want to blend them together so they're really nice and seamless. So again, just following the fur direction. It's kind of coming off towards almost like the upper right hand corner. It's really going over and just adding a couple layers of this. Just really fill it in. Like so. You can even probably blend in a little bit more of this warm grey one just on this right hand side here. And then we just need to come into the underside of the eye. So we're going to work coming down but to the right. Just going to get rid of some of those little pencil crumbles there as well. And this kind of has like a tight kink, so you kind of want to come down from the sort of tear duct and sort of side of the nose area. From there. And then it kind of really tucks up. So you kind of get a nice curve like this. And then it kind of comes, so almost like a soft S again. So you're kind of doing this motion. Coming right into that sort of eyelid area and just kind of really going over the warm grey one there, and then just filling in this section, just filling in that kind of curved soft S. Okay. So now we have our different areas of base layer down. So we've got our warmer tones mapped out and we've got our cooler tones mapped out. So we can go in and start to add some of these mid-tones now. So for the warmer areas I've got the burnt sienna. I'm also going to use and replicate some of these orange tones, so I might even come in and use this dark chrome yellow maybe just to add a little bit of an orange tone to the warmer areas. I'm also going to use some warm grey, and then for the cooler areas I've just got this Delft blue and some dark indigo that we can add down. But we're going to start off on this side here, so we're going to add in some of these warmer tones. I've also got the Caput Mortuum violet to add in for the warmer tones as well. So I'm going to start off with the burnt sienna, and all I'm going to do is just really lightly add this in pretty much all over. Like we did for the skin around this area, we're just going to basically come in and do that, but we're just going to use really light shading, and you're going to work in the direction of the fur. You can see just how light that is. So just keeping the shading nice and light. I'm holding the pencil quite far back, as you can see. So I'm just kind of going around this really dark section as well first. I'm just adding these areas surrounding that really dark bit. So just really kind of building in these burnt sienna tones. I'm going to go over with some very light shades of the Caput Mortuum now as well. So where we do have the slightly darker areas, I'm just going to go in straight with the Caput Mortuum. It's just a slightly darker tone, it lends itself really nice to really pitch black areas. But I am going to blend this Caput Mortuum basically all over as well. This Caput Mortuum violet as well is just going to blend really nicely into where we sort of transition into the cooler tone as well. So it's just got a slight bit of sort of scratchy, gritty feel to this pencil, just ever so slightly. You can see the kind of base tone that it's giving. It's really nice, soft, sort of browny violet, which is really nice. So I'm going to come all the way up to that cooler tone. And then in this darker area, I'm just going to come in and just come over with another layer of that Caput Mortuum violet. So it's really nice and dark. So you can see the sort of darker areas and just sort of mapping them out just with more tone. More of these base tones. It's just going to be easier for us to find where we need to add sort of a larger amount of the dark sepia and the black when it comes to adding those tones in a bit. So you can map out all of your really dark areas just by going over with multiple layers of the sort of base underlying tones. Okay, so for the cooler toned areas, I'm just going to go in with the Delft Blue. Again, we just want to do this really lightly. You don't want to go too crazy with the blue. Just want to go in really lightly where we've added that cold grey one. And this study is going to start looking really weird. And you might start freaking out that it's going to look like these colours are not black, but don't worry. So I'm just going to blend it into that sort of Caput Mortuum Violet and the burnt sienna area. And then bring some of the Caput Mortuum through there as well, so we get a nice blend. So again, so it's not just like stop and then start, one colour and then the other. We need to make them really nicely seamlessly blend. Like so. So then just coming off this side, we're just going to start with the burnt sienna again. Just come in here. Again, blending into that Delft Blue. There's ever so such slight sort of blue tones just down here as well. So I'm just going to mix some of that Delft Blue in there. Just bring it down a little bit through here. And then just coming in and filling in with the burnt sienna once again. So just blending all of these areas together. Make them really nice and seamless as possible. So you can see all of the different tones going on, which is absolutely perfect. It's exactly what we want here. I'm going to go over with the Caput Mortuum Violet. That's the dark indigo, that's the wrong one. So what we're going to do in a minute as well is come into this and just blend all over with the white pencil. Then we will resaturate some of the colours where necessary. Then we're going to come in with some of the sort of lighter greys, and then we'll come in with the dark sepia. So at the moment we have got sort of a different variety of tones running throughout, so you can kind of see where the lights and the darks are. We've got a nice dark section down here, so I'm just going in with slightly heavier pressure on the Caput Mortuum Violet there. And just shading the rest. Like so. I'm going to go in with a little bit of the dark indigo into some of these cooler toned areas. Especially just where it's a little bit darker. It's helped to blend all of these different colours together as well. Just coming into some of these slightly darker areas on the fur as well, and just overlaying some of the dark indigo. You can see it kind of creates this really nice kind of unique dark tone. This is just going to help to really darken everything when we come to adding all of the sort of darker greys over the top. So this darker area as well, I'm just going to add a little bit of the dark indigo. So you've got some really nice dark areas really starting to set off there. Okay, so we're going to take the white pencil and we're going to give this a whole blend over. And then we can resaturate and then just start to really darken. And that's where everything will really start to come together then. We can really start to make it look like dark black fur. So you can see that just by adding the Caput Mortuum and the dark indigo together, you kind of got this really nice dark tone here. And then we can just develop on that. So just working the white pencil over really lightly, just to help to blend everything together. So it's just going to slightly accentuate some of the colours as well. Got quite a few layers down there, so it shouldn't dull everything up too much. You can see it just ever so slightly blends together, and it's just going to give our darker pencils a really nice slick base to work on, so you end up with this really nice kind of smooth looking fur. You can see as we work over just how it kind of just blurs everything together, and it just blends all of those layers and tones that we've added. Obviously some areas don't have that much pencil, like this bit just up here, but areas where you have added a little bit more pencil, you can see how it just kind of slicks together. So you're just making sure that you work in the direction of the fur as well. You don't want to go in any sort of obscure direction and ruin the kind of nice flow of the fur that you've got. You always want to work in the direction that the fur is going in. Okay. So now what we want to do is I'm just going to go over with some of the dark chrome yellow and just add a little bit of orange tone to this warmer area. Just so we can kind of mimic what's going on in the eyes, so we can tie the two colour palettes together. This isn't going to show through very well when we add our dark colours, but it's just going to help to set the tone for other layers. So what we need to do is get our darker greys. So I'm going to use the warm grey 6, and I'm also going to use the cold grey 6. I'm going to give them a really nice sharpen along with the dark sepia and the black pencil as well. So I'm going to give all 4 of those pencils a sharpen, and these are the ones we're going to use now to complete the look of the black fur. So at the moment it doesn't kind of look like black fur, but it's kind of almost looking like some sort of fur, because you've got the kind of different tonal differences. You've kind of got the dark density and the light density, so that's all mapped out nicely, but obviously it doesn't look like dark fur at all. So now we will start to transform it. But you want really nice sharp pencils to complete your fur with. So we're going to start off with our warm grey 6, and all we're going to do is just start to work over from the left hand side to the right hand side like we've done with the base layers. So we're just going to start right next to the eye here, and we're just going to come up and add little flicks. So this is where we start to add in our fur lines. I'm just using the warm grey and grouping these really close together so that we get this really kind of dark concentrate of grey. And it might seem a little bit pointless to add all of those base layers in, but by adding in those base layers you provide a little bit of background, so you will have bits of this lighter area of this lighter background showing through, and that's going to help to create some depth and luminosity to the fur. And also by adding in all of those base layers and blending, you are adding a really nice base for your grey tones to sit upon. Whereas if you just went in with grey like straight on the paper, you'd get a lot of grainy look, and you'd have to go over multiple times with the grey anyway, and it would end up looking quite flat like that. So it might seem like a bit of a pointless venture to add in all of these funky colours underneath, but it really will pay off. So you just want to work in the direction of the fur, just group your pencil lines quite close together. This does take a little bit of, it's like a little bit of a tedious work. You can group them close together. Just continually sit back and look at your work. Now I'm going to work on this first section here, this really dark section, and I'm going to add the dark sepia and everything over that in a second, and then move on to the other sections. So I'm kind of breaking this up into 3 main sections. I just find it easier to work that way. So I'm just doing this first section, then I'll do this top section, and then I'll come through and do the bottom section. So when I'm creating these fur lines, I'm kind of going in the direction of the fur and then working backwards into the fur. That just gives it a little bit more of a more natural look. When you add fur strokes all going in this direction, so following the fur direction, it can look a little bit contrived and a little bit unnatural. So every now and then I just work backwards, just bring some fur strokes coming back, or just kind of sweep the pencil back and forth like that. You want to make sure that you don't add your fur lines in too long either. You want to keep them fairly short, especially on the bridge of the nose here. Just continually adjust that or make sure that you're going in the correct direction for the fur as well, and then it's all making sense. So what I tend to do when I'm recording is I obviously have my camera preview up on my screen along with my reference and everything, and I find it easier to look at that rather than take a step back. So if you are recording your work, or you are doing anything where you are able to use a camera, or maybe like mount a mirror up high so you can look at your work in reflection, then do that. If not, then just like look away, step back and observe your image from afar just to make sure that everything's looking correct. And then if it's not, then you can make adjustments. So I'm just coming into the underside of this eye just here as well, just because this is a really dark tone. I just want to make sure that I get this kind of tear ducty sort of eye corner section in. So where we have really dark areas, I'm really grouping these layers of the warm grey 6 together. And then where they kind of fade out into lighter fur, I'm just moving the fur strokes further apart. Also just going in and just shading over the top just to add in like a block of darker colour. So you can see it's already kind of starting to look a little bit more like black fur, but still not quite there. So you still need to do a lot of work to this. So I'm just coming in and adding the fur strokes up towards the top of the image now. So I find it helpful every now and then to just keep rotating my pencil just to keep the point fresh rather than keep sharpening. So when you've used your pencil like for quite a while just on like without rotating it like this, I find that you end up getting like this flat edge. So if you just rotate your pencil, then you can use that flat edge. It creates a little bit of a point on the end, and then you can use that to add in your next batch of fur lines, and then you just keep rotating your pencil around until you get to like really far down the tip of the lead of the pencil. But you can keep rotating your pencil until you're a little bit further down the core, and then you need to resharpen again. But just saves keep sharpening, resharpening. You can also use a sanding block to keep a nice sharp point, which saves your pencils a bunch as well. So it's already starting to look a lot more like black fur. And the more that we add darker colours, the more that it will obviously look darker. But you can still see all of these lovely tones showing underneath. We haven't lost them completely, and they do serve a purpose. You can see where you do have like slight gaps between some of the fur lines, you do get all of these lovely colours poking through. Okay. So where we do have some of these slightly darker areas, I'm just going to go in and shade, like we did around the eye corner. So I'm just going to use the pencil fairly far back. Let's get rid of any pencil residue as well, so we don't end up smudging that in. And then just shading over with the warm grey 6. So we end up with quite a dark tone to this warm grey 6. Like so. Just up here as well. Okay. So I've actually changed my mind here. I'm actually going to work this layer of grey all over, and then we're going to start to darken. So I'm going to switch out to the cold grey 6, and we're going to use the cold grey 6 in these blue toned areas. So just applying the same principle. Just coming over and adding in all of the darker areas that you need to add in as well, just by going in and shading if necessary. Going to shade a little bit into this warmer area as well, just so we get a nice blend through there. I'm just going to come into the under eye, where we have this slightly cooler tone. Keeping the fur lines fairly far apart as well, where we have these lighter sections, because you tend to get a lot more of like the lighter tones showing through in these bits, so just space them further apart where you do have slightly lighter or sort of highlighted fur. But for the rest of the part, just keeping them really close together. Making sure you blend the two tones together, so really bringing the cold grey 6 into the warmer areas as well. And then we're going to switch back to using the warm grey. And I'm just going to give this a quick sharpen. So with the warm grey. Coming back to the fur lines. Just coming right into the warmer areas. Just these last few little bits to add in with this tone, and then we can go in with the dark sepia. And it'll probably take a couple of layers with the dark sepia to really get that black shiny coat. And we'll also be using the white pencil to accent some of the highlight areas as well. Working in the opposite direction again, just to make it look a little bit more natural. And just shading in this really dark area here. And I'm just going to go in and just shade a few more darker areas with the warm grey 6. Blend it out, just lift the pressure off the pencil slightly when you get to a lighter area where you need to just make sure you get that really nice smooth blend. So you can see all of the kind of bone structure and all of the dark areas on the fur are now mapped out. So I'm just going to go in and just shade a little bit all over, just to slightly darken it up in certain places as well. Just getting slightly darker, and just where you really can't really see very much of the texture is just where it's really dark. So you can also increase the pressure on the point of the pencil just by holding the pencil a little bit more upright. And just come around, blend out some of those fur strokes in that darker area. So you can see it just really kind of getting a little bit darker now. Everything's sort of coming together. Just going a little bit darker on that eyelid, that inner eyelid there. I'm just going to go in even more with the shading just on these really dark sections through the top here. Just get away with a lot more shading, going a lot darker. Remember to blend your shading out though. Just going in with a bit of a harder pressure on the warm grey 6. Okay, so just coming to the end of this now, and then we can pick up our dark sepia and go nuts with getting darker. Now if you wanted a nice smoother look, you could go in and use a solvent to do a little bit of blending if you really want to. But I quite like the kind of grainy look, and that will kind of disappear the more we add down with the next tone, which is the dark sepia. So with the dark sepia, I'm just going to start off in the corner of the eye here and just start to add in all of the dark, really dark areas. So I'm just going to come up and over the eye and add in these eyelashes coming over the eye as well. I'm also just going to sharpen up my white pencil so I can add in some white highlighted pieces of fur as well, and it's going to help to blend everything together. So I want a nice sharp pencil for that. And I'm just going to come in with a sharp dark sepia. This is also where you're going to need like sanding block, and just to keep the pencil sharp as well, because this is where your fur is really going to start to come look glossy. So you want to make sure that you kind of maintain that sharp point, more so than what you did for the warm grey 6 and the cold grey 6. So just going to come in, just add some individual fur lines over here. Being a little bit more sort of precise and a little bit harder with the application. And I'm just going to come in over this eye and just add in all of these eyelashes. So these kind of come down and sweep up. There's a big clump of them here. I'm also going to intermingle this dark sepia with the black. So we're going to use both of these pencils simultaneously to really get a nice dark look on the cat. And we're also just going to use this white pencil. So just above the eye here there are a few sort of highlighted areas. So I'm going to use the white pencil just to come in, pick out a few white strands. It's just going to help to smooth everything together. And then you can come back in over the top with some more dark sepia and some black. So that's the kind of effect that we're going to go for all over this study. I'm just going to come back to around the nose area. And just continue to darken all of this. So I'm just going to come right down here. Using a fairly hard pressure where we do have those darker tones. And just bringing each individual fur line really kind of adding a harder pressure down as well. So you can see just how much it's darkening. And I'm just going to crisscross some of these fur strokes a little bit more so that you kind of eliminate as much of the grain of the paper as possible. Okay, so you can see just how nicely it comes together. So you want to try and avoid adding black where possible, because it's not always entirely necessary, but there are cases where you just do need to go in and just add some black to get it really nice and dark. But a majority of this you can actually do just with the dark sepia and just with some shading, and even just layering in some of the dark indigo and some more of those kind of undertones. So I'm just going to put in some dark indigo over the top of this dark area, just kind of make it a little bit darker. I'm also just going to add a little bit of the burnt sienna just over the top, just kind of glaze that over in that area, and it just kind of helps to blend everything together a little bit more as well. So I'm going to resharpen the dark sepia, so I've got my sharp point. Go back in and start adding the fur lines. So you get a little bit of a lighter tone just on the nose there. And then you've got all of this. This is really quite dark up here, so we can just kind of go in and use a heavier pressure up here. All of this darker bit. It's going to start from this top corner and just kind of work down. Just almost shading as well. Just kind of adding in fur lines. Remember to sort of increase the pressure on the pencil as well. So where we do have a very dark area, I'm then just going in and shading. And again, you might be thinking, why did we bother adding in all of those base tones? But again, it just adds a really nice base to apply all of this dark colour over the top, even though you can't see some of it in some places. But you do get specks of it showing through, and it's those little specks which really up your black fur game. So I'm just using a much heavier hand in these darker areas until we get to the areas where we need to kind of blend it into the light. And then as we get to those areas where it's a lot lighter, I am just lifting the pressure. So the more we work towards it, the more I'm lifting the pressure off the pencil to get a nice gradual descent into the lighter fur. So just need to work on this darker section over here. So again, in this area, I'm just going to add a little bit of the dark indigo. And also just going to add some of the Caput Mortuum Violet over the top, just kind of glaze that over. And then into this slightly lighter area as well. I'm going to also add a little bit of the dark chrome yellow for a little bit of a warmer tone. Also just going to take that white pencil, just add a few white lines. Again, it's just going to help to blend the lighter areas so you eliminate as much of that grain as possible. And then we can go over, I'm going to use the black pencil here. Just add some fur lines up through there. Like so. So just on the very edge of this eye, I'm just going to take the black pencil and just use the very point just to bring a few tiny little fur lines off the edge, just to break that edge up, just to make it look a little bit more realistic. And just add some very fine lines just coming over those little highlights as well. Really darken up that inner eye corner so you kind of get it so the fur kind of looks like it's sitting over the top, like that. Okay, so we're halfway done. We just need to do the other half now, so we're just going to continue with the dark sepia. So what I'm going to do is just work into this section, the warm section on the side of this slightly lighter section, just work backwards into it. So I'm going to take the white pencil in a minute and just add some white strands coming over that lighter area. I'm going to use the white pencil. Just come in and add white sections, just really coming into the darker section. It's going to help to smooth everything out. As you can see, it's just really nice and smooth. And then I'm just going to add in some black lines over the top. Really darken just this bit above the eye, darken it up a lot. So just by adding the black over it, just kind of gives it like a little bit more of a cooler tone. The dark sepia tends to be quite almost like brown. It is kind of more of like a really dark browny grey. But with pure black, when you add it over with white, it kind of gives this almost blue effect, which is exactly what we're after. And I'm actually just going to use some of the Delft blue, and I'm just going to glaze some of this over the top of this light area so it ends up looking quite blue like this. And then just continuing to add in darker areas. So I'm just using the black, using the pencil quite upright and just using a little bit of pressure through the tip of that pencil. Just darkening up certain sections and just working backwards as well in the opposite direction of that fur. So we're just going to come into the bottom section now with the dark sepia. So just working on this underside. So just using a little bit of a harder pressure to really darken up some of these strokes. and coming in, and I'm just going to use some of the dark indigo to just shade this bit up, just kind of tone this sort of more blue toned section. I'm also just going to come into this with some more of that black. I'm just going to tone up this little eye section as well. So it's coming all the way around the eye to meet up the other with the other section just up here. Going to give the dark sepia another quick sharpen. Should be the last time now. I need to get a little bit darker right into the eyelid, and then you've got a lighter section which we're just going to highlight by using a little bit of the white. So tiny little dots of the white right next to the eyelid, and then we're going to darken the eyelid with the black. Like that, and then we need to darken directly like underneath the kind of where the eye socket would be. So I'm going to use a combination of the black and the dark sepia just to darken that bit. Okay, so we need to add a lot of kind of toning and sort of adding in the bone structure on this bit. So I'm just going to add in some shading. so we can get all of that structure in. Still continuing by adding in some fur lines as well. I'm also just going to layer down some more of the Caput Mortuum Violet just over the top of some of this dark area as well. Just going to come into this dark triangle down here, just layer quite thickly down in there. So again, just kind of crisscrossing the hairs just a tiny little amount. So I'm just going to switch to the black so we can really come in here and darken up some of these strands and just overlay, just create a whole darker look. So again, just using your just stepping back and just judging where you need to add some strokes is always the best idea here. Just having a little step away. So just need to come into the eyebrow section and darken this bit up and just come up here like that. And that needs darkening just there. And I think I'm going to layer down some of the burnt sienna over the top here. And by glazing colours over the top like this, you do kind of blend everything together, so you do kind of get a much softer look. I'm also going to add a little bit of the dark chrome yellow for a little bit more of an orange tone. See how that warmth kind of just comes through there. So now you can really kind of see that you've got these cooler toned areas and then you've got these warmer toned areas. I'm also just going to use a little bit of the Caput Mortuum Violet, a little bit more of this through the nose. And I'm also just going to use a little bit more black. Just really come through here, just with a few loose sporadic lines. And then just coming in and darkening up areas just by going in with the black pencil. Just really upping the contrast. So the main contrast we really want to focus on is around the eye. The eye is like the main focal point here. You really want everything to be driven towards this eye. So you need to darken up around there. Make sure everything is really nice and crisp. I'm going to use some more black through here, just create some longer lines through this lighter section. I'm going to add some of that Caput Mortuum Violet to some of these slightly darker areas, and I'm going to also add in some of the dark indigo as well. So by adding in all of the kind of dark fur around this area, we can see that we just need to go in and just adjust a few of the tones through the eye, just to make them a little bit more saturated and just make them pop a little bit more. Okay, I'm just going to go through here and just layer down some of the dark sepia just to get it a little bit darker. I'm happy with the sort of tonality of the fur. All of the dark places are in the right area and at the right sort of strength in comparison to other areas. The bone structure on the cat looks good, so you just need to kind of make small adjustments so that you get the bone structure right and the kind of angle of the face and everything. So just step back, make small self-critical judgments, and then come back in and just work a little bit more and see if you can improve. Okay. So for the eye, I'm actually going to come in there with some of the Rose Carmine, and I'm just going to add a very light layer of this down over the top, just so we kind of get a little bit more of an apricot kind of tone to the orange, and it's just going to help to really kind of saturate these colours a little bit more. And I'm just going to use some of that orange glaze as well, and really come into the main bit that needs working on is this bit here. So I'm going to come in with the orange glaze just around the pupil, and I'm also just going to come in with the yellow. This one is the dark cadmium yellow. Get rid of any kind of pencil dust, and also just around this highlight as well, so it just needs a little bit of work, just a little bit of saturation of colour. Come in with the Caput Mortuum Violet and darken up some of these dark splodges. And again, just on this lower edge. Just coming around the highlights as well, slightly outlining them, just blending them in with some of the yellow. Just using the orange glaze just to come in around those highlights as well, make them a little bit more prominent, and I'm fairly happy with how that's looking. Maybe just a tiny little bit more green in a few areas, so a little bit of that earth green. But I am completely happy with how that's looking. We've got a really nice colour going on the eyelid. Perhaps we just need to come in there and just exaggerate that waterline a little bit. So using this same pen, just going to add another little layer of this over the top. nice and vibrant, like that. Maybe just come into the highlights again a little bit. And just adding in a tiny little bit of green around the pupil as well, in the centre there. There we go. So to finish this off, I'm just going to use the Delft Blue. I'm just going to come into the lines of the whiskers and just shade them. So using the sharp point of the pencil and just kind of trying to get into that groove as much as possible. Also just taking the black pencil and just blending this one in a little bit. And then we can also just take the white pencil and just get into there a little bit more. Like so. I'm really happy with how this is looking. So what I tend to do is, before I go in and adjust too much, I like to make sure that I leave my drawings at least a good couple of days and just let my eyes kind of have a break from this, work on something else, or just work on something completely different, like a different medium or something like that. And then I like to come back in a couple of days when I've had a little break and then make any adjustments that I feel need making, because I could continue to make adjustments now and then maybe the wrong kind of adjustments, like this bit here. I could just be working away and then all of a sudden it could just get worse. Whereas if you allow yourself a little bit of a break and a breather from the piece that you're working on and come back to it and view it from sort of with fresh eyes, so to speak, then your mistakes or anything that you've kind of done well or need improving on are amplified, because you're coming at it with fresh eyes and you're not kind of you're not kind of using the eyes that you've already used to look at the work, like to add in all the first strokes. Because at the moment I'm kind of misled by my eyes by thinking that certain areas need improving when they don't. So the longer you leave something, let it kind of have a cooling off period, the better. But the only thing that I do notice does need darkening is this section here. And a little tip that I have for you guys is to use a Faber-Castell Pitt Artist pen in black. I've got a nice brush tip here, and you can use this to get into the really dark areas that really need darkening up. So I like to use this and jot it down, and then I like to blend it out so the edges aren't so crisp with a black or a dark sepia pencil. So I'm just going to add a little bit of this on top of these coloured pencil layers here. And you can see it just darkens it even further. Again, you could use a solvent. You don't have to use like this kind of tool or anything like that. If you don't want to add pen to your coloured pencil drawings, that's fine. But you can see just how much darker things get when you do just go in and just exaggerate those dark features with a little outside help. So it works best when you have a lot of coloured pencil layers down, because then it takes longer to dry and then you can work the edges a little bit more. So I'm going to come into, so I like to use this like as if I'm using, oops, like a pencil. So I create fur lines with this and then just blend them out. I need to just work in small areas and really quickly. So then you can just take your coloured pencils as well, just really work over them, because this is like a workable area, so you can really blend it in if you need to. Just going to add some of this over here as well. Again, just increasing the pressure on the pencil and working into the outer edges of where you've added that pen will just help to blend it in. So I'm just going to add a tiny little bit on the underside of this eye just here. Maybe a little bit up through here as well. And then I think everything should be dark enough. You can see just how it's kind of increased that contrast, which is what we are after. There we go. So look how nice and dark that's got there. Lovely rich black. And then we can, now that we've darkened that up, we can just go into this bit and darken this as well. There we go, much better. Really happy with that now. You can see just how much difference that has made on that as well. So what we're going to do now is the fun part. It's kind of like the unboxing. I'm just going to take off the tape. I always like to put tape around the edge so I end up with this really nice fine edge ready for framing. So I'm just going to take off all of these strips. Super satisfying, this part. And the last one. There we go. So there is the finished piece. I'm really pleased with it. You can see the true colours of it if I put it down like this. Sometimes when the camera's shining on it, like or the light's shining on it, it just gets a little bit reflective. But if you hold it down like this, you can see all of the true colours, all of the bone structure, all of those fur strokes and everything. and I'm really pleased with the outcome of this. So I really hope that you guys have enjoyed this tutorial and that you have found it useful, and I can't wait to see all of your attempts on when drawing this, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye! Thanks so much for following along with this one, guys. Once again, make sure that you post over on Instagram and check out my Patreon as well if you'd like to follow more real-time in-depth tutorials like this one. But thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!